Okay, we should be live. The all-important record button has been hit, and we are going. Hey guys, welcome to the roundtable. My name's Matt Ward. I'm not real that relevant. I'll be our presenter today. I have three of the top guys in crypto. We've got Clay Collins, founder of Leadpages. If any of you are internet marketers, you surely know that. Nomics and the Flippening podcast. We got Paul Veradittakit. It's terribly hard to pronounce, Paul, so I'm going to let you get that one in a sec. Partner over at Pantera. And Roger Vera, early Bitcoin advocate and now quite influential in the community. So thanks for coming today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
The worst part about doing these type of things is introducing people. So take a second, each of you start, Clay, just introduce yourselves, give a little bit of a background, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, so prior to starting my most recent company, which is a cryptocurrency API as a service, I started a company called Leadpages. I started that in January of 2013. Grew that from 0 to 50,000 paying customers. It was a SaaS business. We raised $38 million in venture capital. It was a fun run. I really like scaling companies up to around the 80 to 100 person mark. Past that, I really like hiring a professional CEO and moving on to the next thing. So when I found the company that I was at last and started, when I found that, or when that got to probably around 150 people, I worked with the board to hire a new CEO, and now I'm doing Nomics, which is at nomics.com. Like I said, we're a cryptocurrency data platform and really an API company. We don't build any blockchains, but we're very involved in the space and work with a lot of quant funds.
Which is incredibly important when you have so much data from so many terrible sources. Paul, introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a partner at Pantera Capital. Last name is Veradittakit. It's crazy complicated, but it kind of just rolls off of a drum roll. So just kind of think about it that way. Yeah, I've been in the space for not as long as Roger, but I've been in space since early 2014. My background, I've been an economic consultant, and then I did a lot of business development growth for some early stage startups in the daily deal space. I did a bunch of partnerships and fundraising, but for the last 8 years, I've been an investor. I feel lucky to be an investor in two spaces really early on. I was focused on mobile in late 2010, really investing into the mobile app space, using a bunch of data. I invested into a company called App Annie really early on and a bunch of other mobile apps. But when I came across Bitcoin from some of my friends at Lightspeed, telling me about some of the companies that they were investing into, and then eventually they invest into one of Roger's companies, blockchain.info. Really got excited. I was like, man, there's so much potential in Bitcoin and what it could really do for finance and other sort of things. So kind of went down the rabbit hole, got connected to Pantera, and I was like, wow, like these are the type of people that I want to learn from. And really, what they were missing was someone to actually do a lot of the deals and venture capital. So basically just kind of ran in there, been running the venture capital side since last 4 years. We've deployed into 30 or so companies on the equity side. And then, one of our companies ended up being, or one of our investments ended up being Polychain Capital, really got deep in tokens and crypto. We brought on Joey Krug recently, and now we have an ICO fund too that's investing into just pre-sales. And then, what Clay would like, we also have a quant fund too. We should connect both of you guys together.
Awesome.
That's also using a bunch of data to actively trade cryptos. And yeah, we're managing about $700-800 million worth of crypto. I focus on early stage ICOs and venture.
Wait, so Paul, did you say, so you guys are in the GP of Polychain?
We are.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Good work on that one. And Roger, take it away.
So I've been a fan of science fiction and economics ever since I was a little kid. And when Bitcoin came along, I knew that people were going to start using it as money. And the science fiction money that I had read about in books as a kid was finally here. So I couldn't help but get involved full time. Before that, I had my own business in Silicon Valley selling networking equipment, mainly optical transceivers to people all over the world. And been involved in Bitcoin full time for 7.5 years now. So the time really, really flies. And I had zero gray hair at the beginning of it. Now I have a few, but I'm still enjoying the journey every day.
We're all getting the gray hair. What was your favorite sci-fi book?
That's a really hard question. One that I think really made me excited about Bitcoin, though, was probably Neil Stephenson's Cryptonomicon. But there's too many great sci-fi books to pick one that's my favorite.
So it looks like we got two people on here that are pretty tied into the institutional investments. I wanted to get into that. So everyone that's interested in investing wants to know when the big money is coming in, and everyone's kind of speculating. So let's start a little bit of speculation based off of what people are seeing. Thoughts? And anyone can take any question.
That's a question for Paul to me. So
yeah, no, that's a great question. I hear that quite a bit. I mean, obviously you can see that last year was just, a bunch of retail investors coming in, especially in Asia. You got Korea going gangbusters, China going gangbusters until regulation came down. I think there's definitely 200 new funds. Who knows if they're really, funds versus just like, a personal capital. But nevertheless, there's a lot of capital coming in that's looking to speculate on this from sort of the fund management side. Now, when are we going to start seeing banks get in the picture? Goldman Sachs is starting to look into this with their trading desk. Pension funds, fund of funds, they're definitely having a lot of conversations with funds and trying to figure out ways to potentially prepare themselves to get in. But I think it's going to take a little bit more time. That's why we say that it's a great time to get in terms of like, hey, well, this is before a bunch of capital is going to come in, either into funds and also into the space itself. But what's needed is basically, two things: a little bit more clarity on regulations, and if regulations never comes, then they'll come in anyways. But again, like they're waiting for certain positive signs on that, and we're obviously really we obviously have constant conversations with people around that side, and they're looking for sort of solutions around custody. And on the venture side, we're also looking for different solutions on custody too, for our funds, and also just in general, it's a pretty large problem. Now, I think we're starting to see some signs on the custody side. Nomura just mentioned, the head of digital assets just mentioned that, hey, we're going to start doing custody of crypto sometime in the future. We've seen State Street mention a little bit about that. So, I think all of that's going to be coming, whether it's from startups or whether it's from, some of the bigger guys. And it's just a matter of time. I think maybe later this year, early next year, we'll start seeing some big capital come in, and that's why time is now.
So, I would agree with what Paul said. I'll also add to that. I'm an LP in a few cryptocurrency hedge funds, and part of the reason why I do that is so I can go to the LP meetings. And what I've noticed is that over time there are more and more institutional folks showing up, and maybe they're not in the fund, but they've been invited. They're kind of like barnacles hanging on for the right time. I was at Consensus, and there was a lot more suits
craziness
than hoodies than I'm used to. So it definitely feels like the interest is ramping up. They're participating in terms of showing up to conferences, going to LP events. It feels like there is a shift towards it happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the big checks are being written just yet. I think it's really important to notice that to note that like BlackRock has like $6 trillion under management, which far eclipses the entire cryptocurrency like market cap. So I do think it's coming. I do think that traditionally, what we've seen is financial instruments being made available to institutional investors at first, and then they kind of trickle down to retail investors, or things like private equity in companies being offered to accredited investors, and then later it gets resold to pension funds, or my grandmother buying stocks. And so I think this is the first real opportunity to front run the institutional money, and I think it's a huge opportunity, and I'm a believer in that it's coming. We're experiencing a huge bear market right now, but I think anyone who's been in the space for any length of time has seen like multiple bear markets, and this ain't no thing,
Speaking of front running and being an early evangelist, Roger, you got into this way ahead. What's pulled you in, and how have you seen the industry evolve?
I guess just like you said, there were no seats in the beginning. It was only hoodies and T-shirts and tennis shoes. Whereas now, there's lots of institutional money coming in, and everybody in the whole world's paying attention. So that's, I guess I'd like to say that I knew for sure that was going to happen, but it's nice to be vindicated when it actually does happen. And here we are today. I guess did all three of you go to Consensus, or how many of you guys were at Consensus? I do have a question for you guys about that, though. So
our team was there. I wasn't.
Okay. I was there.
I was there.
So I guess I'm a little, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but I'm a little bit confused. Like for me, the entire point of this from day one was to have like money for the world that can't be controlled by anybody and people can use it as money. And then they have the biggest cryptocurrency DLT blockchain event in the world at Consensus, and they didn't accept cryptocurrency for the payments for the tickets. And to me, that just kind of feels like they're missing the entire point.
And they charge $3,000 a ticket.
And they charge $3,000 a ticket too, with no crypto option though too. So
yeah.
And
any thoughts
Midtown
on
Manhattan, all that.
they're not accepting crypto, or like how did that make the conference feel?
So to me, the conference felt like a shit show. It really felt like Lord of the Flies. It feels like a number of things were happening there from, I think, a sociological perspective. I think there's this combination of, not having established power structures in place. So everyone seems to be grappling to be first in whatever subcategory of crypto exists. There's a lot of people to the space asking questions like, what do you think of that? Whoa, I don't know about this. What do you think of this person? Vitalik's too young. What do you think of Bitcoin Cash? I don't know. What do you think of what this person said this? It was just, it felt like high school. And I felt like I had to take a shower when I was done. It didn't feel like there was a lot of productive dialogue that was moving the space forward. It seemed like there was a lot of people, like basically the attendance there is just highly correlated with the market cap and with the money. I would have rather spent more time just talking to engineers and developers in these various projects who seem to, for the most part, not even be in the room.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Clay. I mean, I am shocked. I assumed it was already happening that they're accepting Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other cryptocurrency. So that's really, really shocking and surprising to me. I mean, same thing with Clay. I mean, I think, with all the capital that's there, obviously capitalism means that they're bumped up the price up to 2,000-3,000, all the sponsorships and appealing to Wall Street and everything like that. I mean, which meant that like all the conversations that were there were just like high level, like chit chat. And I think the conference is good because it gave everybody a focal point to come and meet. So it's what you make of it too. You go out there, you find the people that you're going to have like the right conversations with. You have them outside the conference. Kind of distract yourself from all the noise, and then of course there's Token Summit and some of the other conferences that you can kind of get deeper with. So it kind of gives optionality, but I agree. Like this time, it was way too much high level fluff, and I think most people just kind of like had to give themselves some balance to just kind of get away from that.
It was also like incredibly monetized. Like every square inch of that event was it was just short of having ads in front of the urinals. Totally. It was just every square inch of that event was monetized. Like chairs, plates, dinners, like tables, everything. It was off the hook.
Totally agree.
How do you reset the expectation? So my background is startups, working with early stage companies, and you'll see with startups, if you get the culture wrong in the first couple hires, you're fucked. The business is going to hell, and it's not going to work because it's so important when you have a small scale. But as you start to bring in more people, each person dilutes the culture a bit. But we've gotten a huge dilution thanks to all of the news hype around Bitcoin, Ethereum, blockchain, money. And now we have a lot of greedy ICOs, we have a lot of shit happening, and we have, like JP Morgan coming in. How do we keep this about building and making something important versus just making money?
Is that for me, or?
That's for anyone who has a strong opinion.
I would like to hear Roger's response.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I was distracted a little bit as someone was coming into the room. But the question was, how do we maintain the Bitcoin ethos and culture that?
Yeah.
I think that's hard because all of us have a little bit different wants and desires for what that culture should be. But from my point of view, it's always saying what you actually believe and not just keeping quiet because other people might think something differently. And I think even when everybody seems to believe something differently than you, that's when it's the most important for you to speak out and say what you think, because maybe there's a bunch of other people out there that think the same way that you do, but they look around and they don't hear anybody saying that. So they think that they're all alone and the only one in the world. Whereas if you speak out and say what you think, then all these other people that maybe agreed with you to begin with, they'll think, oh, I'm not alone. These other people think that too. So even when you feel you're all alone in your viewpoints or your ideas, I think that's when it's the most important to speak out and say what you really think.
It's only like 1% of people that'll actually do customer service request, even if 100% of people are thinking it. It's just only a certain percent. This is something that I've always found fascinating. And it's slightly, it's tied towards you, Roger, but it's tied towards everyone. And we're building something important. and people let politics get in the way of importance in a way that feels similar to religion. So I wasn't supposed to go here, but I'm going to go here. How do we make people realize that everyone is kind of headed in the same direction, even if there's different ways of doing it?
I don't know if everybody's headed in the same direction. There's a big group of people that are hostile to the idea of using cryptocurrency as a currency, and Bitcoin specifically. So I wish I could say that we're all headed in the same direction, but I don't think that's the case, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with Roger on this. I mean, that's why you see so many different, you see forks, you see so many different blockchains. Some are focused on more on privacy, some are more focused on governance, some are more focused on transaction throughput. Maybe, obviously those are for, use cases like IoT or payments, et cetera. So I think people have their own ideas of what is needed or what's an ideal blockchain. And I guess that's the great thing about open source and decentralization. We're going to kind of see everybody come out with their own ideas. We're going to let the public decide, like, what should be more important and what's not, and then that'll be reflected on, price, et cetera. So it's going to be fun. I mean, a lot of people are focusing on different ways to scale and bottom layer, second layer. So it's all going to play out. It's all going to consolidate. And I'm excited to kind of see what happens, and all the the politics is going to come with it. But as we've seen, like, good shit rises from the ashes.
Yeah. So just to pile on here, I want to say I agree with what the two of you have said. I'm a big believer in the unbundling of this token stack, or the technology stack here. I think that you're not going to replace the global financial system without a whole bunch of different technologies and approaches that appeal to a variety of different people. I don't think there is a one size fits all thing, and I think that's great. I think that's like the beauty of the fair market. And if someone wants to do something else, like, just go ahead and do it. And to kind of add on to what Roger said, like, I just want to commend Roger. Like, there's lots of things where I have agreed with you and things where I've disagreed with you, but I really appreciate that you've always spoken your truth. And I think there is a lack of product people in this space. There's a lot of really great technologists, but I've certainly been in a position before where I've been really excited about something and seen it just blow up over 2 to 3 years, and then see it hit scaling issues, and just like pulling out my freaking hair every single night going to bed being like, how the F do we scale this? And hearing people give me solutions that seem like they're not really aware of the bigger picture. So thanks for the dividend, and also thanks for always speaking your truth. I think it's been a net positive for the community as a whole.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'll also answer a little bit of that last question and add upon Clay's stuff. I mean, what I think is important with all this capital that's coming in is actually, especially in the United States, I'm starting to see a better quality of deal flow coming out there, because with all this capital, it does attract a lot of great talent that's coming into this ecosystem. And talent means people that have started companies before, people that have raised money before, people that have used to build culture in the right way. Every single employee that they add, they're making sure things are kind of put in place so that these guys can actually thrive and execute and have the same vision as the founders. So with that, I mean, I really sort of see that there's a little bit of shift in terms of product guys that have done it before, entrepreneurs that have done it before, and people that are starting to raise more sensible rounds, knowing that, like, hey, we don't need all this capital, we don't need to blow money on yachts and stuff like that. Hey, we were here to build a business. We can focus on the application layer. It's going to take a little bit of time for everything else to kind of scale, but we can get products out to consumers, and we can do things the right way. So that's what I'm excited about. Hopefully, getting products out to consumers.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, that really summarizes how I felt like at Consensus, and at every single thing that was happening there. I was like, I could be building. Like, should I be standing in line to get lunch, or should I be at home building? Like, should I be talking to this person who I just met, for 15 minutes about some random rant that they have, or should I be building? In almost every single case, I felt like that the answer was we should have been building, and I think that in general, the space, I think we just need to put our heads down and just ship.
Unless you have 200 million in a Swiss foundation, you don't have to do jack. So, I mean, is that the reason that we have had such a problem? Is just so much money came into the space so quickly that it was like little kids in a candy store that ate too much sugar and had to throw up? Like, how do we fix that? Is it just ICOs like you were saying? What do you guys look for investments? How do you evaluate?
Well, I mean, so this is my question for like Paul. Like, it feels like in almost every instance, if you could have placed money in equity in a business versus buying even a shitty token, even buying like a shit coin,
Yeah.
like Tron or IOTA, or actually, I don't know what you guys think about those things, but like in many of those instances, it feels like the token would have outperformed. So, how do you think about the effect that all this money has had on the space in entrepreneurship? Do you find that maybe someone who 10 years ago seeking to make it in the world and enrich their bank account, maybe they would have started a startup in the past and now they're just doing an ICO and dialing it in?
Yeah, I think again, like it takes experience. It takes time for ecosystems to evolve and people to learn. So again, we now have one of the first, killer use cases of Ethereum, which is basically, hey, we can raise capital and share the value of these projects with consumers. And it went gangbusters. You know what I mean? People took advantage of that. There's so much people that saw some of the wins out there, and you saw people raising $200-300 million and starting venture capital firms and doing some ridiculous stuff, and then it's going to take some time to see these things sort of like blow up and lawsuits come out where it's like, okay, well, we've seen that this hasn't worked, but we've seen that there is potential here, and then better entrepreneurs coming in and trying to bring a little bit more experience to the table, and so I think for us, like, we're very conservative in terms of what we look for in projects. I mean, we want entrepreneurs that have relevant experience, entrepreneurs that have done it before, entrepreneurs that have the right vision, want to build companies the right way, raising sensible rounds at sensible valuations, and actually have a use for a token, not just kind of bolting on because, hey, this is a great way to just throw a bunch of money at users and just use it for user acquisition. Is actually real utility with between these tokens. So that's kind of what we're looking for in these token rounds. And I think people are saying like, hey, equity is going to go away. No, I mean, equity is not going to go away. There's a lot of great companies and applications, services, infrastructure that just doesn't need a token whatsoever. So I think equity and tokens can go hand in hand, and we're going to be looking at both. Whatever people want to do to fundraise, we'll take a look. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to team. It comes down to, do I trust these guys with my money? Especially in environments that are going to be super frothy or super bare like it is right now. Can these guys navigate these hurdles, build the right team around them, and really just kind of go through what they need to do to get their product out to consumers and enterprises?
There's a lot of different types of crypto assets now. How do you guys view the different types? So we have currencies, we have utility tokens, we have securities, which is, if I haven't actually plugged Coral yet, but basically we're funding the 99% of businesses that VCs won't touch. If you want to learn more, coral.io. People get screwed if it's not $1 billion business. So we're helping those companies raise some money. So what are you guys looking at? What are you interested in the evolution up till today, and what's happening now?
So I guess I'll jump in first there. So a lot of people think that ICO and crowdfunding is the killer app, and that everybody's doing that on Ethereum. And I agree, obviously that's really popular, but I think the killer app we already knew from day one, and that's using cryptocurrency as a currency. And that's what made Bitcoin popular in the first place, was actually using it as money. So I think the real big winner in the end, and it's hard to pick which one is most likely to be it, but the cryptocurrency that actually gets worldwide traction and starts being used around the world as money. And because money has such strong network effects, I think there's a very high likelihood that one, or maybe 2 or 3 at the most, currencies will wind up with 80, 90, 95% market share of the money use case. And whichever one winds up being used as money, that's the one where you're going to have the biggest gains and the biggest upside there. And I think the 2 front runners on that at the moment are probably Ethereum, or actually 3 front runners: Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Ripple. Don't underestimate Ripple, even though they can freeze your account at any time. They can freeze your US dollar account at any time also, and that doesn't stop people from using the dollar one bit. And when you compare using Ripple with making a regular bank transfer, Ripple beats that hands down for sure. So for me, that's I think the killer app has been there from day one, and that's the use as money.
Clay?
Yeah, so in terms of categories, I just wrote it down, but I think there's just going to be an explosion of these taxonomies, and there are going to be more things added over time. But I think it's currencies, security tokens, commodities, utility tokens, and like crypto collectibles. I mean, that's what I have so far. But there's just look for that to expand. I don't even know that it's going to be a super productive exercise to even categorize these things 5 years from now.
Interesting. So you think we may have everything blended?
I think people are just gonna, I don't know. Yeah, I mean that's a great economic question. I don't know that the human brain is sort of has these things built in. I think we think of ourselves as we have money and we have property, and we can exchange money for property. I don't think most people think of money as strictly property. But I think there's really money and there's everything else.
So I remember when digital wallets were first coming out, and the thought process was you can add all your credit cards, you can pay from a wallet, and bingo, everything's good. The problem, of course, being the same as the yellow pages, it's alphabetical. So the A's, the American Expresses, are the ones that crush it. Do you guys foresee wallets becoming more powerful in the future and having the control over the default currencies and the default types of payments people do?
I think that's already the case. Between the combination between wallets and exchanges, and there's obviously a blurring of the line between a lot of those with things like Coinbase, which I don't think it's actually technically accurate to call it a wallet. I think it's more like a bank, but there's a lot of bank wallets out there where they're holding the funds for you, but they give you the on-ramps and off-ramps to traditional currencies. So I look at Litecoin. It didn't shoot up in price until Coinbase added it and gave people easy access to converting their dollars to and from. So whatever wallets add whatever currencies and give people the on-road and the off-ramp to fiat currencies, those are the ones that become popular. So.
But that's wallet's still used primarily as an investment vehicle, not as a primary payment vehicle. It changes a little bit once it becomes a primary payment vehicle, because then you're using it on a daily basis. It's not something that people are just buying and holding to make a shitload of money and go to the moon with their Lambo or Tesla.
And I think the only reason it would ever go to the moon and they'd be able to buy a Lambo is if people actually start using it as money. If it's just some speculative bubble, maybe some people will time it right and get out at the top, but certainly some people sold their Beanie Babies at the top, but at the end of the day, that was not a good long-term investment. And if you don't have some underlying utility or use case for these cryptocurrencies or crypto tokens, then I think the long-run future is bleak. And that's why I think using cryptocurrencies as currency in payments to buy and sell things are so incredibly important.
Yeah, I would. I'd echo that. Again, I agree that payments are freaking huge market, and Roger's totally right on that. My thesis on how this is actually going to turn into being used for payments is, obviously like the retailers came in and they offered Bitcoin as a way to pay, but took advantage of the first mover advantage. They didn't really actually give any kickbacks to users, and they're just using it for PR. But I think what could possibly be a gateway to actually people using crypto for payments is actually tokens, and not because people are going to end up using that for payments, but it's at least gonna get more and more people excited about and educational about tokens. They understand that, hey, this is something that we could use to do things with. And it, because of the aspect of being able to speculate and make money off of it, they're going to jump in. Now, once they're familiar with tokens and digital currencies, then because there's a user base already that has a digital currency wallet, then I think it's going to incentivize more retailers and more brick and mortar to actually say, well, now that the user base is there, they're familiar with cryptocurrency, there's more incentive for us to actually go beyond just using this for PR and actually offering perks and benefits. And then I think actually more payments will happen. So I think all these token stuff is actually a gateway to hopefully cryptocurrencies being used for payments.
So I don't disagree with anything that you both have said. I also do want to give a shout out for censorship resistant store of value. I've had funds seized before. I've had wire transfers locked up. I've had some really bad experiences with banks, and I find a lot of comfort in knowing that I can get at my money, whenever I want to, even if I can't necessarily quickly make a payment. That's just really helpful to me, and I can imagine a scenario in the future where, large Fortune 500 companies that spread out their money in a bunch of different financial jurisdictions, so that a circuit court judge in a given, New York can't just like shut down Amazon and inhibit their ability to make payroll. I think there is a similar use case for crypto assets as well. I've never paid for anything in gold, but I do have some gold. I don't think that's the killer use case, but I do think it's a great beachhead, and it's one that is sufficient for me to be as excited about cryptocurrencies as I am right now. That said, let's make payments happen as well.
Let's say we could get to the world where we had a functional stable coin. I don't understand the value of digital gold if I can just have billions of digital stable coins that equal the same value.
I don't think there is anything such thing as a stable coin.
Not yet, but do you think we can get
I don't think ever. I don't think the dollar is stable. I don't think the euro is stable. I don't think any of these things are stable. So they're less volatile than cryptocurrencies have been so far. But I'm not that old of a guy, and the price of a can of soda out of a vending machine in the U.S. is like 4 or 5 times what it was when I was a kid. That's not stable, and it's not because soda is more expensive to produce. It's because the value of the dollar has gone down over time. So they've been more stable than cryptocurrencies, but that's just because the market cap of the U.S. dollar is so much bigger than the market cap of these cryptocurrencies. And I think as the market cap of cryptocurrencies become bigger, their volatility will become less.
And at the end of the day, you have to denominate the ecosystem in something. And so part of stability is just all agreeing that whatever the world reserve currency is what we're going to deem to be valuable. But the second that changes, is whatever stable coin is tied to that. Does that change? I mean, there's no center of the universe here. It's wherever we just decide to place it.
Speaking of center of the universe and changing the monetary denomination, any thoughts on when that possibly could happen?
I think we're. Go ahead.
No. Go, please.
And we touched on it earlier, but I think we're several years behind schedule of where we would have been because the community started arguing and fighting with each other instead of building. And I think it's good that these forks have happened because the different communities that have their own different visions hopefully can spend more time building rather than arguing. And that's what I'd like to see more of in the future. It's just more people building rather than arguing.
Amen. So something related to this that I've been thinking about a lot is how do we operationalize store of value, unit of account, and means of exchange? So store of value, I think, how do we define it?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think store of value could potentially be operationalized as just market cap, potentially, arguably. Unit of means of exchange is like the cash use case, but unit of account I think is a really interesting aspect of money to think about, and to me that's about like what is the quote currency dominance of the space. So everyone looks at Bitcoin dominance, but I think the real power grab in the space is around quote currency dominance. What is the predominant quote currency in the space, and that has shifted over time. There has been some real movements there, and I think whoever wins that potentially could win this whole thing.
Do you think there will be a winning whole thing once money is digitized enough where you don't have to think about it? You can have your own little personal AI wallet, making payments, making transfers, switching things. I agree that I think it probably will get to the 80-20, but I'm just curious to see if there's any alternating opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of sort of mind share shift, in terms of community, and again, it's partly because there was a little bit of a divide in the Bitcoin community that, you know, Ethereum has come along and produced a bunch of different, you know, use cases that people are trying to go after. And, you know, you go to any sort of Bitcoin straight conference and go to like a Ethereum DevCon or something, and you see that there's a huge, you know, community shift in terms of developers. And because of that, you know, Ethereum has sort of, you know, taken a little bit of a lead right now. But then again, I mean, you know, I think for us, I mean, we're investing into sort of new blockchains and new cryptocurrencies, only ones that we think have a potential to be, you know, potentially 5 times better or 10 times better in certain aspects. But at the end of the day, I mean, you could have great technology and everything, but it's all about sort of incentivizing community around it. And right now, Ethereum has it. I could see a world right now where it kind of evolves like exchanges, where, you know, Ethereum is sort of like the global dominant player. You know, whoever becomes the global dominant player, this is probably going to be 1, maybe 2, but really just kind of one that takes shape. But I think just like exchanges, you know, there's going to be local players that, you know, do very well because, again, like they know they can build community really well. They have really sort of tight relationships with influencers, et cetera. So I could see one sort of global winner, and then of course, you know, maybe one for, you know, sort of store of value, and then one for certain use cases like payments, and then we have like sort of local winners that kind of merge.
Ask you to clarify, like when you say that there's maybe one global winner and then a separate one for store of value, what would the global winner be doing that's separate from the store of value as well? You think the payments and the store of value will be separate, or?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see, let's just say, imagine a world where, you know, Bitcoin continues to be the store of value, but, you know, there's something that has, you know, better transaction throughput that ends up being a payments winner, then Ethereum ends up being the one that's used for decentralized applications. So that's where I could see, you know, a few really big winners in certain spaces globally. And then you have like the Korean sort of like, you know, one that dominates Korea more because of, you know, what kind of community that they've built. And it could be revolving around those certain areas too. But, you know, I could see, you know, at least in those 3 categories, have separate winners there.
So I totally agree that I could see like a different platform being the one that everybody uses for like decentralized applications. But I really, really, really disagree with the idea that the currency that's used for payments will be different than the one that's used as a store of value. And we have lots of empirical evidence on that front with like the US dollar. It's used everywhere for payments. And because you can use it everywhere for payments, people use it as a store of value. And if you look around in every country around the world, the same currency that everybody's using for payments is the same one that they use as a store of value. So I don't think that those two things are ever going to be separated.
I'm going to agree. That was my point about the stable coins, is if you have something that's moving around and that is the currency, then why would you not just hold more of that? Especially the reason why, well, one of the reasons why we're no longer using gold is it's a pain in the ass to carry around gold coins. That if you can have digital gold coins, then it's simpler. So I want to transition a little bit into the coming 2 years, 2018 and 2019, in terms of what you guys see on the horizon for ICOs, potential regulations, and potentially interesting projects.
On a side note, do you guys feel really old talking about the coming 2 years being almost? I remember reading 2001: A Space Odyssey as a kid and thinking, oh, the year 2001 is going to be amazing. And here we are almost 20 years past it. And I guess time.
Yeah, we didn't get any of that shit we were promised. Where's my flying car?
Where's Hal, right? The friendlier version of Hal is almost here with Siri, but it's not nearly as smart as or
Siri's
as Hal
stupid. Yeah. At least go with Alexa. We have they're working on not driverless cars. They're working on flying cars that should be operational in the next couple of years. Not in terms of mass scale, but it's interesting. That said, it's just a whole nother story in terms of drunk driving. But yeah, next 2 years, what are your big thoughts on cryptocurrency, and then how it ties into the bigger ecosystem as well? Let's also tie in the 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah, when I think we're going to see more adoption. You want to go there?
No. I just make a lot of noise and I'm facey, so it fucks me up.
There's another thinker that I'm guessing probably all of us on this call are at least aware of, if not a fan of, and that's Ray Kurzweil.
Oh, right.
In his book, I guess it kind of felt like a science fiction book reading it, but I read The Age of Spiritual Machines when I was or somewhere around the year 2001, I think. But he said that change always happens slower in the short term than we expect it to, but much, much, much faster in the long term than we expect to. Or the amount of change that happens in the long term is much greater than we expect it to be, but the amount of change in the short term is much less than we expect it to be. And I think that's kind of the truth with cryptocurrency adoption is in the long run, it's going to have a much bigger change much faster than we expect, but we feel like it should happen by tomorrow. And it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take a couple of years, but it is happening very quickly. So the next 2 years, a lot more adoption, but less adoption in the short term than we would like or expect, but more adoption in the long term than we expect.
Part of that's the hype cycle. So when something gets hyped up, you always feel like it's coming so quickly. And if anything's hyped up, it's blockchain at this point. Everyone is adding blockchain to every single startup name. It's a bit crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that one?
Any interest? Go ahead.
Wait, so I'll just pick up. So just like I made a list. So I didn't know how to prepare for this. So I just read the title and it was like the future of cryptocurrency investing. So I came up with like 6 things here. But I want to add to that, like what Roger was saying. You know, I think most people overestimate what can be accomplished in a year and underestimate what can be accomplished in 10 years. So I think the future 10 years out is going to blow our minds. I think the next year or 2 is probably not going to be super impressive. It's just going to feel like linear progress. But so I made a list here. I don't know how sexy it is, but here's what I think the future looks like, at least from my vantage point. So I think we're going to see a lot of these crypto hedge funds that have come out recently start getting involved in equity. So that they can get cliffs and lockups and board seats and preferred stock and control and all kinds of stuff like that. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see a lot more hedge funds start doing both, taking long and short positions. And I think we're going to see these hedge funds start doing more crypto to crypto trading. So like collateralizing a trade in Bitcoin and then going into Ether and then back, or going into, Bitcoin Cash back to Bitcoin to Z, if you believe that one of these currencies long-term is going to increase in value, why does it make sense to go back to the US dollar if you have a whole other menu of trades available, where you can, make money. The third thing is I think we're going to see more shorting mechanisms available to retail investors because there's just demand for it, especially in these bear markets. So that's prediction number 3. Prediction number 4 is I think we're going to see a lot of VC-backed companies that maybe want to claw back their C or B rounds. Issue tokens and maybe try and get a switch up in their board or get some kind of liquidity for their investors so that they can move on with what they're doing. I think that the nature of equity investing is it's a lot like marriage, and bad things happen in marriages when you can't have a divorce. And right now there aren't a lot of mechanisms available to companies to actually get a divorce. But I think security tokens address that in some meaningful ways. Number 5, I think we're going to see an explosion in tokens. I think we're going to see instances where like the local coffee shop that's about to get replaced by Starbucks might be purchased by the neighborhood, and with security tokens issued. And so I think that if we think there are a lot of tokens now, just like wait till a bunch of metropolitan coffee shops start having their own tokens. I think this is going to just explode and fragment and go in a gajillion pieces. And that doesn't just go for tokens. I think it goes for decentralized exchanges, shared liquidity pools. I just think that this is going to be more unbundled, more fragmented, and that's actually and more decentralized, and that's a good thing for the space. So that's my those are my 5 things for the future. Hopefully I didn't take too long there.
Clay just called you guys out. I would like 5 predictions from each of you now. Any thoughts?
I know. I bet those were great. I feel you were so much more prepared than the rest of us. Those were super interesting predictions.
No,
thank you.
I would echo. Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about, we talked about some of the ones that, that are, I think are pretty pretty obvious are going to come. I mean, institutional investors are going to get in the game. That's one that we've already talked about. Security tokens. I mean, I think, we invest into Harbor. So again, we are pretty excited about what that could mean. Fractionalized real estate, fractionalized, ownership of investment funds. I do think that it's going to take a lot longer than what we expect. I think everyone's like, oh yeah, it's coming right now. It's coming right now. No, I think it's going to take time. The infrastructure needs to sort of be there, and regulations is even more paramount. And so I think that's going to take some time for all of that to get funded before we actually start seeing more and more ones get off the ground, liquidity, et cetera. I'm excited about basically just consumer applications really coming to market. Better ways for retail investors to gain exposure to the space. It could be, hey, a whole 10. It could be buying baskets of currencies, indexes, things like that. I think there needs to be more improvement on removing the friction for people to get exposure to this, and some of that may just be some really cool decentralized applications that really start knocking it out of the park. Maybe it's Augur in terms of decentralized prediction market. Maybe it's a decentralized poker or gambling. Those are sort of areas where heavily regulated industries that you couldn't do things before that you can do now in a more global manner. I think those are pretty exciting. We're going to see a bunch of funds and a bunch of companies also die out pretty soon too. Guys that have raised a ton of money that just can't get off the ground, and we're going to see a sort of shaking up of the ecosystem. But then also I think we're going to see, like Clay mentioned, it's going to get crazy because with all these new tokens, I think it's going to spread over to more and more countries. Southeast Asia, I hear, is, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and investors that are just seeing that that ecosystem is going to get really, really large in terms of use cases for cryptocurrencies. Africa, Latin America. So I think this is going to go global, and people say that this is a bubble. This is just the beginning. So it's going to get even crazier, and of course, things are just going to shake out over time.
I don't have 5 individual predictions, but I really like the things that you guys are saying, and Clay's list was awesome. I was really impressed with that list you put together. So
that was quite impressive, Clay.
Quite impressive.
I want to follow up on 2 of those things. So with the explosion of tokens, I want to kind of play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
You want to trade me your headphones for my shoes so that we can trade Roger for his shirt so we can grab Paul's headphones? It becomes complicated when you have to have such different mediums for all of these tokens to be passing back and forth. There's a reason why we have currencies, and there's only so many of them, and it's to facilitate trade. How do we avoid going backwards, and will we go backwards?
Yeah, so I think the things you mentioned are less liquid and less fungible than a bunch of ERC20 tokens. So I think if we have liquid markets and accurately priced assets, and we have liquidity, then swapping all these things becomes really easy to kind of add to the what Paul was saying about Ethereum. I think what the most impressive characteristic of Ethereum for me is that it has these like second order network effects. So not only is there a network effect around Ethereum, but there's networks built on top of Ethereum that themselves have their own network effects, and that reinforces Ethereum's network effect, or I believe it does. There are definitely people who would disagree with me on that. So seeing these just decentralized exchanges, like essentially flip a switch and add an ERC20 token, tends to give me confidence in the ability for these swaps to have to happen. Then I think we start talking about other means of swapping tokens. I think it's going to be fine. And I own a bunch of stocks, and then I have own ETFs that own stocks, and I probably have like 500 stocks that I own directly or indirectly. And I think most people, if they counted what their pension funds, their college endowments, their 401ks were invested, I think they'd find that they own a lot more of these assets than they probably originally thought. So I think it's entirely possible.
For investment purposes, but what about for actual everyday use? So what about applications that are using utility tokens? So the only one I've seen that actually is...
Oh, yeah. Does every business need its own currency? No. No, it does not. No, it does not.
That's what we're doing right now, and it's horrible.
Yeah, I agree. It's just too many people are issuing tokens that there's absolutely no need for the token at all. And it's so much more convenient if everybody's using the same token as their medium of exchange there. So yeah,
Speaking
too
of
many tokens that aren't needed.
Have we seen any good projects besides Brave that have actually shipped something that uses a token?
I think you can look at Bitcoin itself as a token. And so that's the first like super interesting token that was useful.
Okay, it's not the same type of utility thing. It's more value-based utility, but I'll give you that just for the sake of it.
Yeah, you're right. Brave has one. I mean, Funfair, one of our investments, basically helping to build decentralized casinos. They're starting to get into beta. So again, not a lot of usage yet, but things are getting. Augur's launching July 16th. So again, it's around the gambling and gaming space. I think that's kind of where it's going to initially start.
Just the most regulated industries are the ones that are the most ripe to be disrupted by these decentralized technologies. And obviously gambling is right there at the top of the list, but I think securities are right up there as well.
Yes, they are.
I was meeting with a lawyer recently. He came down to visit me in St. Kitts, and he had just come from a meeting with the SEC, and he said the SEC is really trying to figure out or they're really, really looking into ICOs. And this was maybe 3 months ago. And I said, let me guess, they have absolutely no idea what they're going to do about it. He goes, how did you know? And I said, because I don't know what they're going to do about it either. Like, what can you do to stop this? And you can grab some people and arrest some people in jail and put them in jail, but that doesn't stop the whole ecosystem in itself. So anyhow, the most regulated industries are the ones the most ripe to be disrupted by this.
We're big fans of Polymath. We're partnered with Polymath. I think there's going to be a huge explosion of security tokens because essentially everyone's launched utility tokens pretending to be utility that are actually securities that we all want to make tons of money on. And the use case of security tokens is just clearly obvious. The stock market sucks. If you can tokenize it, it's a significantly better system. I would say 2018, 2019 are the security token years. If that's my thoughts. I don't know if you guys have opinions.
Yeah, I'm really bad at timing things. I like to say that there isn't a ton of lying happening in the blockchain space. Is there much? Is we all have a tense problem, and there's just too many people talking about things that are off in the future as if they're happening now. And I have no clue. As an investor, I'm really bad at timing the market. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it's coming. We just don't know when. Lots of flying cars are coming. We just don't know exactly how soon.
And you have to be right and non-consensus to make money. What are some contrarian things that you guys think that the market is just completely going the other way on?
I think Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core still has a bigger market share and market cap than Bitcoin Cash, but if you look at the underlying potential usefulness, there's so much more of it available on Bitcoin Cash than Bitcoin Core. So I think at some point we'll see a flippening between those two. That's my prediction.
As long as Ethereum doesn't get you first.
I think Ethereum actually will surpass Bitcoin Core's market cap before Bitcoin Cash. I think that's likely to happen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Huh.
That may make 3 of us. Yeah, it's interesting. Ethereum clearly has the use cases. It clearly has what it's building, and even though the killer use case has been scams and spam, it's moving into something that I think could be very interesting. Thoughts on the benevolent dictator model versus the completely open source? We've seen how politics can play out and make things complicated one way or the other, regardless of how you sit. Thoughts on having leaders?
I think it's worked pretty well. In the past, Bitcoin basically had Gavin as the benevolent dictator after Satoshi, and Bitcoin spread very quickly, and more people were using it. And Ethereum has Vitalik, and Dash's system is also very interesting as well, though, with their governance system. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and I think the more experiments that people try, the more likely we're going to find ones that work well. So we're kind of having an evolution of governance systems for decentralized. Not all of them are even currencies, decentralized platforms. So, anybody else want to build on that?
No, I mean, I think
well said.
I think yeah, it's pretty well said. I mean, I think we're going to see a bunch of different options out there, and I can totally see the sort of there's one founder, 2 founders, 3 founders. At the end of the day, like these systems are still built on sort of community. So whether the community sort of includes one or not, I mean, they'll figure it out. So just kind of leave it up to the crowd.
Yeah, one of you guys touched on it a little bit before. I think probably the biggest problem for both Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core is the brain drain that's taken place there, because all the fighting and the arguing, and so many smart people have gone on to things like Ethereum and a bunch of other things out there, because man, having a good community with good vibes and good team spirit, like, that's worth a lot. And Bitcoin, both versions of Bitcoin don't really have that right now because there's so much fighting going on.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed also at Consensus, is there was just a lot of just like people in a bad mood, just like a lot of frowny people, and I miss the positive vibes that I felt existed in the space 3 years ago, and I don't know why the space seems to like be as negative as it seems. Like, we're all optimists, we all believe in like disrupting existing structures, and there's no way you'd be involved, if you didn't believe in the potential to change the world, right? So like, why are we all sitting around like crossing our arms like we're at a punk show, pissed off at the world? There's just so many great things to be excited about, and like, let's just build what we think should exist and stop tearing down other people's projects. I won't go on this rant.
Work on building your own project rather than tearing other people.
Yeah,
totally.
exactly.
That's actually a question, I think. I would like to bring this up. What percentage would you say in the crypto community is positive and negative? Because I would say the flip side of what you're saying, Clay, is the reason why a lot of people are in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because they're cynical about how the system is broken, completely broken and terrible, and they need to rip it all apart. Let's flip that, because you're obviously a very positive person, Clay. But I think, Roger, when you came into this, you were very cynical with how the world was working, is my understanding, and wanted a better way.
I guess I'm super positive on the crypto side of things, and super upset and unhappy with the way the traditional world has been working. But to touch on the everybody looking like they're grumpy people at a punk rock show or whatever, however you put it there a moment ago at the different conferences. So I've been to a bunch of conferences in the last 6 months or a year here. And there were 3 that really stood out in my mind as to just how positive they were.
Oh, nice.
And one of those was DEF CON for Ethereum down in Cancun. I was there, and it was a giant love fest, and everybody was so excited, and we're going to change the world. This is great. And it was really exciting to feel that positive energy. The second was Anarchapulco down in Mexico as well, which was, I think, in February of this year. And that's with a bunch of libertarian anarcho-capitalists running around. And it wasn't even strictly a cryptocurrency conference, but everybody there is excited about the way in which cryptocurrencies bring more liberty to each individual. And again, there was a lot of excitement there. And it was interesting, just the camaraderie and the high spirits that were there. And everybody at what's basically an anti-political conference was busy talking about cryptocurrencies the entire time there. And then the third was just like a week ago, at the Bitcoin Cash conference in Hong Kong, put on by the Canadian billionaire Calvin Ayre. There were a bunch of excited people that were working on building products, and I didn't go to Consensus myself, but I thought it was so neat. So the venue was at the Four Seasons Hotel. They managed to pay for the entire venue in Bitcoin Cash. They paid for the after party in Bitcoin Cash. They had a big yacht tour they paid in Bitcoin Cash. They paid for the entire thing in Bitcoin Cash. And to me, that's the sort of thing that I like. I'm using cryptocurrencies as currency. And anyhow, those 3 conferences really stood out to me as being conferences with good spirits and good people excited about changing the world. Whereas just yesterday I was at a traditional banker conference to present on cryptocurrencies yesterday, but there wasn't this camaraderie. It was basically, I could feel the fear in the room of the traditional banking system. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Or how are our businesses going to survive with what's coming? So it wasn't excitement. It was an optimism. It was more fear of change. Was at the conference yesterday.
Which is why there's so much money in Switzerland pouring into ICOs. I was in Switzerland for a while, and they're all terrified. Did you wear a suit to your banking presentation, Roger?
I did, of course. Yeah.
Okay, wasn't sure about that one. So I have one last question to leave everybody with. I know you guys are all busy people changing the world. What is one thing that you guys are excited about today that has absolutely nothing to do with projects that you're working on?
Who wants to go first? Do you have a list of 5 things, Clay?
No, I don't have a list of 5 things. I know everyone got excited about this, and then the excitement died down. But I'm super stoked about decentralized exchanges, and just remain really, really excited about the ability to, to exchange cryptos, directly from our hardware wallet. So I'm really excited about that.
I thought the question was for things outside of the cryptocurrency space.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about things you're directly working on.
Right?
We'll do both. One that you're not directly working on, and one directly outside of cryptocurrency. We'll play both games.
Oh, okay. So the decentralized exchange thing, and the second thing is just like being a dad. So I have twin 2-year-old daughters, and man, talk about something that I just did not have any idea if I didn't know if I'd like it. I thought it could suck, but it's like the best thing that ever happened to me. So, that's been awesome.
How in God's name do you handle twins? How old are they?
Yeah, they're 2 years. They're 2 years old.
Oh, so they're like mobile, and you have to like tie them together to be able to do anything.
Yeah, no, they
2 for
do
$1
that to themselves already. Yeah, 2 for the price of 15 or something.
What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I think what still gets me excited in the space that I probably don't focus on as much these days is some of the stuff that's happening in third world countries. I mean, again, like Latin America, Argentina. We've done some stuff in Southeast Asia, but having cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, provide people a way to have financial freedom, to be able to do things that they can't normally do with their current banking system, and just that's what gets me excited. I mean, guys that are just really gaining huge user adoption, whether it's for the unbanked or whether it's for teenagers that don't have bank accounts. I mean, I think the underserved and giving them sort of financial services. I think that's still really exciting to me, even though I think my focus right now has been sort of outside of that because of what's going on in sort of other sort of spaces in this ecosystem. And then outside of work, I mean, I would have to say kind of goes hand in hand, but the fact that there's been a lot of great relationships outside of the space that have been built because of, the space itself, right? A lot of people are interested in the space, and a lot of good people are coming in. And again, it's been great, as an investor to kind of have the sort of lines between sort of work and friends, get kind of, basically get blended together, and you really just have a lot of really great friendships outside of work. And I think that's been the most beneficial thing that's happened recently.
I want to throw a shout out in there. The most recent Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast had a correspondent in Venezuela. It was fascinating to listen how horrible it is. The guy gets paid cash, and he has to optimize how quickly he can spend the money because he's losing money every single second that the day's going by. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I guess the interesting point that Paul made, though, too, I hardly even talk to any of my non-crypto friends at all anymore. All of my friends in my social circle, everything's crypto people at this point. So it's wonderful to have been able to meet so many smart, interesting people in the space. So that's really fun. So things that I'm not working on directly that I'm interested in the crypto space, and I've helped fund one, but I haven't been involved directly at all. But decentralized prediction markets. I don't think people realize how world-changing those are and how powerful those are and how amazing those are. They let you not only see the future, they can help inform you what actions you should take today to achieve what ends you want to have happen tomorrow, but they also let you affect the future as well. So it's like a science fiction machine is being built that's finally going to exist. So I think decentralized prediction markets are incredibly exciting and interesting. And then so outside the crypto space, I guess I'm just kind of interested in transhumanism and extropianism in general. So increasing the amount of intelligence in the universe. What an exciting thing to do. Let's build the machines that are going to solve the problems that the human brain can't even understand what the problem is at all. That's pretty exciting for me.
I hope you're putting some of that money into that, Roger, so we all live longer. Make a nice, interesting world. Thanks for coming on, everybody. It's been fun. Now's your chance to just short plug, just explain what you do, why you do it, where people should check you out, the Twitter, all the good stuff.
I'll go first, I guess. I'm busy promoting Bitcoin Cash as cash for the world. I received my first Bitcoin ever from a faucet run by Gavin Andreessen, where they'd give out a little bit of Bitcoin for free to anybody who went there. That's no longer possible on Bitcoin Core, but we have a faucet built at free.bitcoin.com. Anyone, anywhere in the world can get some free Bitcoin Cash just by visiting free.bitcoin.com. So give it a try and tell your friends.
Brilliant marketer and evangelist. Paul, you're up.
Yeah, so obviously I work for Pantera Capital. We're thought leaders in this space. So if you want to read some of our newsletters or see some of our tweets, at Pantera Capital. I'm also pretty active on Twitter too. So I'm at Veradittakit, which you may have to search me up to actually be able to spell that. But nevertheless, I mean, for me, I mean, I love just meeting great entrepreneurs, meeting great projects. So if you yourself are an entrepreneur or somebody that's trying to disrupt the world, trying to bang down doors, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to take a look and chat.
Awesome. So you can learn a little bit more about what I'm doing at Nomics.com. We're an API company and we provide crypto data. I also run a podcast called Flippening that you can find at flippening.com. I think it's the most professionally produced podcast in the space. We have an audio journalist produce it. We do a lot of post-production work. We're trying to be the Planet Money of crypto. We're often in the top 100 in business. And so if you're interested in this type of content, go ahead and check it out at flippening.com. I'm also on Twitter at Clay Collins. So hit me up if you want to chat.
And there is a really great podcast, guys. You should check it out. And now I need to share what I'm working on. So guys, Coral.io, we're funding the 99% of businesses that VCs and banks won't touch. Essentially, small businesses are screwed. They don't have a chance if they're not going for $1 billion outcome, and a bank's not going to lend you any type of money. We're doing revenue share-based financing so that companies can get money to grow and scale without giving up a dime or a drop of equity. And then if you want to learn a little bit more about me, the syndicate.vc, I host podcasts just like this with some of the smartest angels, VCs, both in crypto and building some of those transhumanist and technology world-changing type products. The syndicate.vc or mattward.io. And it's Matt Ward on Twitter. It turns out there's way too many Matt Wards. It's way common white guy names, so I had to go with the its and be a little bit egocentric. So yeah, thanks for tuning in and thanks for coming on, Roger, Clay, and Paul. Yeah. Cheers,
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers.
That was